But first off, I wanted to thank everyone for joining this session today. Hopefully it'll be interesting. I mean, there aren't many times where you get, three quote unquote competitors all on the same panel. But I guess, a lot of them are a lot more collaborative than I even knew. So I'm Alice Leung. I'm an investor at Brick and Mortar Ventures. We invest in construction technology startups, and kind of from my role, looking at the startup side, I've also been kind of following, what are the big players in the industry doing? Because a lot of the times these are acquisition opportunities for the startups, and really understanding kind of where the big companies are going also provides insight on what should startups be building and where we should be focusing our time. So that was kind of the genesis of getting this group together. I've talked to a lot of folks in the construction industry, and when you're on the projects day to day, sometimes it's hard to just take a step back and look at, big picture view, where are the technology solutions that we're using from a day-to-day basis? Where are those going? And, how are they going to be adding value to me as the customer and all that type of stuff? So I'm actually gonna now let our panelists introduce themselves, and I will start with Kris down on that end.
Absolutely. So, Kris Lengieza, I am the Vice President of Global Partnerships and Alliances at Procore. Like many of you, I worked in construction for 15 plus years before I joined Procore about 5 years ago. Spend a lot of my time. I like to say that I have the second most fun job at Procore, second to Tui because he's the CEO. So I like to envision he has the funnest job. And then I get to deal with all of our partners. So basically, how do we move the industry forward by working with other technology partners, which we have partnerships with all the people here, or whether that is industry associations, or that may also be our services partners. So it's a lot of fun for us, and excited to be here and talk through the topics today.
Thanks. Aviad?
So Aviad Almagor, I'm the Vice President for Technology at Trimble. I'm an architect by profession, but I decided to save the world and to cross a line and kind of stop working on using my limited architectural skills. So starting with Revit when they were a startup, and after the acquisition by Autodesk, I moved to a company called Graphisoft, a European company dealing with BIM as well. This is where we started to work on new technology for integrating 3D models, schedule, and cost. And this turned to be a startup called Vico Software, and Vico was acquired by Trimble about 13 years ago. So when I joined Trimble, I promised myself 6 months with Trimble, too big company and stuff like this, but I found myself still here in charge of the technology and innovation in the company. So meaning dealing with all the early phase technologies, AI, robotics, computer vision, quantum computing, brain computer interface, all the early stuff, all the fun stuff, with a goal to bring them into a maturity level, of course.
Thanks. Sunil?
My name is Sunil Dorairajan. I'm part of Autodesk. I'm in the construction industry strategy group, and what we do in that group is a big part is definitely M&A, investments, shaping product strategy, and cultivating and growing our ecosystem of technology partners, as well as any other collaborators who have any convergence between construction and technology. So I came into Autodesk through acquisition that Autodesk made, which was Pipe. It's a company that I co-founded. And previously, I used to work for a general contractor for 10 years or so. Similar to Aviad, and I think Kris is also a civil engineer.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm also a non-practicing civil engineer, thankfully. Looking forward to this discussion. Yep.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing that I didn't pick up on until now is that, so we have civil engineer, architect, civil engineer, and I was formerly a GC, and we're all kind of outside of our where we started, and we're all more or less on the technology side. So I think that's pretty interesting, but also speaks to, our industry where, to be successful on the technology side, you almost need to understand, the nitty gritty of our industry and all that. And I think it's actually really cool because I don't think you see this across, outside of construction where you actually have people that come from the industry themselves to build the technologies or to work on the technology side. So I think that's actually super cool. So yeah, thank you for introducing yourselves. I guess we'll kind of jump into some of the, I guess, major topics. So the first topic that I wanted to get into was this idea around platform. So you guys, have probably have seen, some of the big announcements from some of these companies that, over the last couple of years, there's been a focus on this thing called a platform. And there's always this kind of dichotomy, when we're thinking about technology, software, and even outside of the construction industry. Is this a point solution or is this a platform? So for the first question, this is actually for Aviad. I'll let you kind of lead this off. Like, what does platform mean to you guys at Trimble?
Oh, wow, jumping right into the fire. It's a hot topic. So we can define platform from the technology point of view or from the business side, but I think that the most interesting definition and perspective here will be from the industry point of view and from the potential user's point of view. And looking at it from this prism, it's really about creating an integrated environment where we bring together stakeholders, data, and business workflow across the industry lifecycle. That's the core of it. And when we have this structure, we can enable collaboration and we can enable the flow of data. Now, in order to support this kind of concept, we need to enhance this platform concept with what we call common data environment, which is really the way the ecosystem, our partners, our competitors, obviously our users, can really consume the data and ensure that they gain the most out of this concentrated environment. That's the core of the things. And when you have a platform, you have the ability to start automating processes, something you cannot do with the point solution that you mentioned earlier, because everything is in the same place. And when you automate processes, you can really take platform services like AI services or IoT services or data analytics services in order to gain the best insights from the data that you have in the platform. That's a short answer.
Yeah, thanks. Anyone else want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, Procore has kind of always had a perspective on platform, right? It's in our mission statement, right? To connect every global construction company on a global platform. And for us, in a lot of ways, it's very similar to what you said, which is how do we connect workflows? How do we connect data? And how do we do that in a way that people can take advantage and build upon it? That's what I always say to folks is like, when you're in the construction industry, think about building. And when we're in the construction software building industry, we talk about building upon the platform, whether that is building out a workflow, building out a process, building an integration, building on top of the data that you have. And so there's a few core elements that I think are really important to us when it comes to platform, which are, one, the data, right? Having data aggregated across all of the tools, all of the pieces of the platform, and being able to consume data from other places and be able to get it out. And then also shared experiences, right? Whether that's shared UI, whether that is shared analytics, whether that is the ability to leverage tools across all of the platform, so that it doesn't feel like multiple experiences, right? And so that really leads to a strong workflow and strong process, which drives to things like adoption, which is always a challenge for users when they're rolling out any new technology.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a perfect segue into the next topic, which is interoperability. So I think, as you look at all the different solutions out there, some of those issues around point solutions and using all these one-off little tools is that, you may not have single sign-on, you may have 10 different usernames, you may have data that's kind of siloed within the different solutions. And at the end of the day, like, you want to see the holistic picture, right? So one of the things that I've been hearing from a lot of my contractor friends is this challenge around the lack of interoperability across all of these different solutions in construction. So Kris, kind of back on you, if you could talk a little bit about, interoperability, or I guess the challenge of interoperability, and how might Procore be addressing that?
Yeah. I think the big challenge that we all want to avoid is not having to do work multiple times, whether that is in the field or in the software that you use, right? Rework is bad in general. And so when people ask about interoperability, the driving factors around that sometimes is like, hey, I want to put this in one place, and then I want everybody else to either have access to it or to be able to use it in their system. I think some of the challenges around interoperability have been around the fact that we were dealing with legacy tools that couldn't necessarily connect that data. I think the fortunate part is that everybody who's sitting up here, right, we've modernized, right, we have APIs, and so we have different ways of solving that today, which is like, in the real world environment, there are customers who have Procore and Autodesk Construction Cloud integrated, and they're passing information between it. I know we have customers with Trimble data passing in between it. It really comes down to what does that interoperability mean to you, and how is it going to actually support the workflows that you need. And so, whatever solutions you're choosing, whether it's you're looking at one of us or something else, I think investing heavily in understanding how can they integrate with others. How can they move data in and out of their system, right? Is it easy to do? Is it hard to do? Do you have to pay for it, right? And how does that support the workflows that I need to have on my job or to get my job done? Because that will solve a lot of your interoperability problems. There's never going to be, in my opinion, this is my opinion only, a construction standard data format. Like, we need to kind of like toss that idea out the window. That's a 2019 or a 2005 idea, right? We have APIs now. We have large language models. We have a lot of technology that can help us aggregate and consume and translate data. I just don't see a world where we're all going to be like, hey, tomorrow we're all going to pump everything out into this standardized format.
Yeah, actually, Sunil, I'm curious, kind of given the pipe acquisition, when you were on the pipe side of things, were you thinking about interoperability and kind of like, did that come into the decision on kind of where the home became?
Not necessarily where the home is going to be, but fundamentally, what did our customers want, I would say. So, I mean, while during the pipe days, definitely Procore was like front and center to most general contractors in the US. That's where we predominantly operated. So it was pretty natural for us to say, hey, we need to invest in building those integrations with Procore. And Kris, who was a customer at that time, also helped us along the way to build the most meaningful integration. So I think when it comes to interoperability or integrations in general, I think like if there are startups in this room, it's like every customer wants to make sure it's part of like the questionnaire right now. Can you integrate with XYZ, right? It's by default, so it's not an option. Yes, creates a little more, I would say, like a R&D overhead on your part, but I think it's a good way to create and cultivate those relationships. Because it's like some startups might be, hey, am I exposing myself if I integrate with Procore or Autodesk or Trimble or any other player? But I think you need to like believe in what you're doing and the mission that you're on, and be open about where the data integration makes the most sense, because people don't enjoy reduplicating information that's in one platform to the other. So I think it was like a natural flow in terms of, hey, we probably had like 17 integrations. Yes, while most of them were API, some are Excel, CSV,
Yeah.
which is where things kind of break down. But again, those are things beyond our control and how some other systems are architected. But I think there needs to be a constant focus of how do we move this information from one platform to the other. And that way, it's like you're seamlessly enabling the workflows and not leaving the customer where they have to take these Excel spreadsheets and now try to figure out how to format that into the new platform.
Yeah. And it is pretty crazy, like when you think about, interoperability and passing data back and forth, you kind of then like build out this like map of all the data that needs to, go back and forth. And, really what it comes down to is like looking at, all the collaborations within industry between, small companies, big companies, and all that type of stuff. And I think, the startups and the small companies kind of depend on the big companies like you guys, because you guys are the core for a lot of things. But at the same time, the big companies can't really provide everything, right? There is no, just like there's no one, common data format, there is no one kind of, tool that everyone across the entire supply chain, all the stakeholders can use. So kind of that dependency between, small and big, I think that's very interesting. And, Sunil, now in your current role at Autodesk, kind of on the other side of things, what are some of those reasons that you guys, first partner and then get to the point of acquiring some of these startups?
Yeah, sure. It's sort of like try before you buy kind of a thing, right? It's like we need to know the companies. And again, when we look to increasing our ecosystem footprint, we don't go with the intention that, hey, let's put these companies on our shopping list or whatnot. I think the intent is to genuinely solve the customer problems. And if the startup can scale being in our ecosystem and doing what they are on their mission and continuously growing that traction, which again, if over a period of time, if it meaningfully provides I would say more logical sense for a customer to see these two solutions in one platform, I think that's like the natural course. And I think we all get that part, right? So, I mean, for us, like I think integration is the way. Pipe was integrated into Autodesk. We integrated with BIM 360. And I think there were a lot of, I would say, like good workflows which helped the customers eventually. And over a period of time, that bubbled to a fact that, hey, this solution, if it lives in our platform, it just would make it more seamless for the end user. So again, there's many reasons for acquisitions, right? One is you do it for geographic footprint, you do it for technology, you do it for people. I think one thing at Autodesk, I'm sure, like I think Trimble and Procore think about this in the same way. I think the culture and people are super important. While these startups are bringing, let's say, a technology set, a sample set, or a products to acquirers, I think one of the most important things that companies look for is where can this team take us next, right? I think that's equally important. It's not just at what you're bringing to the table right now, but we would like to see founders who come to Autodesk and who can challenge us to basically make us grow and help push our own boundaries. I think that's equally important. Yeah.
Aviad or Kris, do you want to add anything?
I totally agree. I mean, out of those three major reasons, the innovation boost for the company, the market business reasons, the market gaps or niche markets that the startup address, and the talent, I think the talent is the most critical one, is the most interesting one for us. And it's really an opportunity for a company like Trimble, large organizations, which by nature suffer a bit from this kind of size, to benefit from fresh ideas, domain expert, and really a startup spirit, which is so critical for the kind of development of new ideas.
I would agree with everything that's said there. I double down on two things. Sunil mentioned culture, right? We're talking about people here, right? And it's really important to understand, like, hey, are these folks that are going to drive our company forward, drive the industry forward? So a lot of time is spent not just like, hey, is this a good technical fit? Is this a good market fit? But also, is it a good culture fit? And, we've looked at things and decided that wasn't the case before and moved on. I'd say maybe the one thing that might be a little bit different about Autodesk and Trimble and Procore and our approach is almost everything we evaluate is we're going to deeply integrated into the platform from the beginning, and it's going to become just part of the main stack. So it's kind of a requirement for us. We're either, just not far enough along on our journey or don't have enough experience. I'm not quite sure what the reason is. We're not going to buy things and just kind of leave them alone. It's just not in our model. So whenever we're looking at companies, we're looking at, hey, does this solve a major customer pain? Is this going to be relevant to a huge percentage of our customer base? How is it going to fit into our tech stack, right? How are those things going to layer in? And that's why, sometimes it takes a long time once an acquisition does happen to actually get those things integrated, because we want to have that solid platform for everything.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. I actually never put two and two together, where for Procore, it's like all within Procore, whereas for Trimble and Autodesk, like sometimes you guys have the tools that you kind of just leave and they're kind of standalone but integrated into the platform, and the brand name is still there, kind of thing, right? Because Procore is all kind of Procore, but within the other two, it's still like, well, I guess PlanGrid got the rename, and there's some of that, but it takes, it's
correct. I think there's definitely some differences there, but of course, like the PlanGrid acquisition, we definitely didn't want like PlanGrid to be a standalone, right? It was one of the major investments Autodesk did in construction. So we basically combined or unified the tool set that we had, the capabilities we had in BIM 360 and PlanGrid together to come out with Autodesk Build. So where it makes sense, we would deeply unify, integrate. Whereas some tools, we've basically let them to be standalone for various business reasons, which makes sense for us. And we're working with customers to still like uncouple some of those things as we try to do on this unification process. But those are not easy decisions.
No.
And
There are a
actually,
lot of repercussion on what's going to happen next.
and in a way, it brings us back to the interoperability discussion because we also look at it internally, not just with partners and other ecosystem members. It's also about how we integrate those acquisitions internally. And sometimes it's a challenging process. It's not always an easy step for many reasons, not just technology.
Yeah, and I think the three of the companies here, you guys have, development and R&D budgets. I'm kind of curious, like, how do you guys think about build versus buy? If anyone wants to jump in on that one.
There is additional option, which is partnership.
Yep.
So
True. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Everybody forgets about the partners. It's
That is true. I'm sorry. I'm sure
listen,
it's
no,
your,
no,
it's
it's
your main role.
I don't have a complex, I promise. No, it's actually a really good question, right? And I think we all have some framework, right, that we sit down and we go, okay, when we look at this company, right, is this core to what our customers need? Is this the reason that they're coming to us, right? Like, should we have this internally? Should we build it, right? Or if, hey, what else is on the market, right? I think these conversations have evolved significantly in the last 3 to 5 years. 5 years ago, you asked that question, it's like, yeah, there's nothing else out there. So you got to go build it, right? Today, the ecosystem is filled with great startups solving problems in unique ways that make great partners or great acquisition targets. And so then the question is, none of us have bottomless pocketbooks, right? So you have to figure out like what things actually make sense to buy versus what things can we just partner with, right? For us, we got to weigh all those options to make a decision on whether or not we want to invest our resources in buying something, or we want to invest our resources in our own R&D team to go build it. Or maybe, like we've done some really interesting things with partnerships to avoid having to do either of those things and being able to still deliver the same value to a customer.
Yeah, I would like to chime in on this as well. I mean, for large companies like ourselves, there's always some R&D motion going on in most of the things that exist. Of course, there's always some solutions which are very different. Case in point, like let's say dusty robotics or rugged robotics, which are very different applications in the field. But being a software vendor, there's always going to be some roadmap items. But I think we look at it to Kris's point, definitely companies have the M&A framework. We look at companies that either are up for sale or we want to build a strategic partnership with them. We look at it from, can they get us into new markets? Is there like a new persona that we can expand upon? Mm-hmm. And then the tools and the capability itself, like how well does it complement us? And I think right now things are challenging even for like big companies like ourselves because there are many tools, and sometimes we wait to see what's going to happen in this particular segment or a particular theme to see who the emerging winner is going to be. Mm-hmm. And there are some good examples of that happening in construction. There's like 5-6 startups trying to solve the same problem, and all of them are like very well funded / overfunded. So
Hey.
I mean, being transparent and candid here. So it's like, do we want to put our hand in there to see what happens? And I think customers have been a good advocate for us to guide us along the way because their pain points resonate, right? And I think we all have different counsels that cater to these customers who are always helping us to make sure that, hey, we don't do something ahead of time, or this is not aligned with most of our strategic priorities. So that voice definitely feeds into a key decision-making factor in the M&A world.
Yeah, Sunil said it earlier. It's like you have some semblance of a try before you buy, right? And so like we listen to our customers. If hundreds of our customers are using something, it's usually a good indication that there's a good fit there with our market. But still doesn't mean that we need to buy it, right? And it's a hard decision to make.
Yeah, and one of the reasons we added additional options, the Trimble Ventures, is to really be somewhere in the middle, to kind of invest in the company, better understand the strategy, better understand the capability of the team, and once the solution is mature enough, make the decision if this is a good fit for our culture, for our technology or not. So that's another option that we have in the market.
Yeah, thanks. And, one of I don't know if anyone picked up on this, but I titled this panel session, AEC Big Tech, and I kind of look around and it's like when you in the industry big tech, generally speaking, is Facebook, Amazon, or Facebook, Microsoft, and all those, where they've kind of gone to a point where they're kind of dominant in what they're doing. And I feel like in the AEC space, there's a couple of those players, each kind of with their own differentiation. But over the last couple of years, I couldn't help but notice that, hey, these companies that have started in one area are starting to expand kind of horizontally into different places, right? So with Procore starting with, GCs initially, now working with trade contractors and owners, Trimble, both hardware, software, and kind of expanding more on the software side, with both, ERP focus and whatnot too. And then Autodesk traditionally, design, but through the PlanGrid acquisition and now with ACC and Build, now coming into the construction side. So it's been interesting to kind of see, these interesting expansions, at least for us to follow, right? Because we're trying to figure out, what are they going to buy next? What are they going to build next? Who are they going to partner with and all that, right? So this is all, selfishly for me to understand, who to invest in. But I think it's interesting for the industry, because I'm sure the industry has already kind of picked up on some of this with, new customers, new collaborations and all that. But for you guys here, I'm curious about kind of where you see the company in, 4 or 5 years from kind of if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing a little bit on that strategy, and we'll start with Kris.
I always have to go first. So, yeah, I said this in an earlier discussion earlier today. Our vision is to improve the lives of everyone in construction, right? And so we really do mean that. And in order to do that, we've got to serve all the personas that live inside of construction. And, that started with GCs, then it went to trade contractors, then it went to owners, right? And then we have a tremendous amount of collaborators, right? Whether it's architects, engineers, suppliers, and manufacturers. But one thing has always rung true, will always stay true as far as I've been told, and I don't expect it to change as long as TUI's around, is that we are focused on construction. So if it's construction related, we're probably going to do it at some point or another, right? We're going to service those customers. Now that might be with free products and just collaborative solutions like we have today for architects and engineers to be able to log into somebody's account and manage their work, or that might be with paid offerings too, to be honest with you. I don't see us going outside of that, to be 100% honest. And I think, so you'll see us continue to double down, triple down on the existing spaces that we're focused on, GC, owner, trade, and then those who collaborate on those projects, so we can kind of get everybody connected. We all know this, projects and construction companies, they're networks. They're networks of companies, they're networks of people. And so you have to be able to have people work together in order to be successful. And at the end of the day, that's our goal, is how can we streamline that for some. Excuse me.
Aviad?
Yes, so I agree with your kind of analysis about this move. I wake up one morning, I found those two guys in my bed. Don't know why. But, and by the way, we see similar patterns in other industries. So Trimble is quite diverse: agriculture, transportation, geospatial, construction. We see the same pattern also there, and it's natural because in a company in the size of the companies we see here, unlike a startup, they want to serve larger portion of the market, a bigger ecosystem, better connection, better understanding, better ability to provide the flow for the solutions. What I see is a kind of a next step for us, several next steps. We will certainly continue the investment in the platform, in the common data environment, which I think is critical for the industry. We will continue the investment in technologies like autonomy. Trimble is also in the hardware business. and emerging tech like AI, which we think will transform the industry. We certainly invest in partnerships. What the work we're doing now with Autodesk, it's kind of a long-standing relation with Autodesk. Work we're doing with Procore, we believe, I think all of us, that this can help the customers, that can help the industry grow and be more efficient. And the last topic is sustainability. We want to make sure, and we're already in this journey for quite a long time, that the hardware and software solution we deliver to our customers are helping them to reduce the carbon footprint, and they can also measure it, not just talk about it. So that's the 4 areas of investment.
Awesome. Thanks, Sunil.
Yeah, I think from an Autodesk perspective, I would say definitely design to construction, right? Like we are the content creator, we have a strong foothold in design, and we have construction tools now. So we've been working and will continue to invest, working in connecting design to construction, design to pre-con to construction. I would say like we have a best-in-class pre-con set of tools today. And some tools are like outside the platform. Some tools are getting baked into our Autodesk build. So I think there's going to be more unification as we see like where it makes more sense. Like we have ProEst, we have Building Connected, we have TradeTap, all these pre-construction set of tools, and we have Autodesk Takeoff, we have Assemble. So like how do we actually figure out like how do we unify or integrate these products with our PM tool, which is Autodesk Build. I think the AI ML piece will continue to happen. I think like we discussed in the other session, construction generates tons of data every day and every single project. I mean, I think this is going to become a big problem if it's not already, to figure out how do you basically riff through this much information to know what's actionable, what's not, what's going to help you when there is a litigation. And it's like the industry is always like kind of defensive there to figure out the person with the most information wins, right? That's how at least the GC school that I went to have been taught. So I think making sure that there is more meaningful insights, information. I think all the 3 companies are already doing, I would say, like several initiatives towards making sure that there's more insights and IQ getting built into the platform. I think that's going to help companies in many ways. I know I'm kind of double clicking there, but I think one most important thing that I like the most is like young project engineers coming on and embarking a digital journey through any of the PM platforms. I think if there is a lot of education that the platform can provide them, it basically ramps up their knowledge of the industry. And it's hard for PMs to sit down with project engineers and say, hey, this is how you need to review these shop drawings. This is why an RFI is important. This is a clause you have in the contract. So there's several ways in which you can basically accelerate the learnings of a young project engineer or an early superintendent, a finished superintendent coming into the industry, that I think AI will definitely help in that area.
Yeah, and I really like that last point, kind of about that like knowledge management space. And I think just given, we hear a lot about labor shortage. There's a lot of people that are heading into retirement, and it's like, how do we capture, all of that knowledge and, just the accelerated rates of which, we bring people onto construction, and there's almost this expectation that like, hey, you should be able to Google whatever and kind of learn on the fly or whatever. So I think it'll be really interesting to see over the next couple of years how the industry can leverage, all the data that's on your platforms, and how we can kind of feed that back, kind of make that feedback loop and feed it back into, what we have on site. So I think that'll be super interesting.
We were talking about this earlier, right? The people coming into the industry, construction's not easy. So we have big time burnout problems, mental health problems in our industry. And part of that, I think, is because there isn't a great way to educate those folks fast enough. And so I think we, all 3 of us, to be honest with you, have an obligation to the industry to try and make that easier for people so that, like I said, like we're trying to make it so that they can do their job faster, better, and spend more of their time on work that's valuable to the project rather than just hunting for things and searching for documents and where's that change order and, let me Google, what do we all do? We all pick up our phones and Google it when we want an answer. Why aren't we able to do that on a job site, right? And so I'm really optimistic about the impacts that users will have by leveraging their data with some of the new iterations that are out there to improve significant ways.
Awesome. We've got 2 minutes left for questions from the audience, if anyone has anything.
Actually, you can correct me too if you disagree, but I get the sense now that a lot of construction tech startups, their exit strategy is to be acquired by 123. And there's a joke about AI companies that their exit strategy is to get acquired by Google. That's where I got that. But do you agree or disagree with that? And then if you think that's the case, do you think that's a bad or a good thing for you?
So shedding a little light on venture capital, because I think VC is still a, new thing to a lot of people. And I didn't know anything about VC until I joined. Like I said, I used to work for a general contractor. We have to make investments that make us a lot of money, which I think a lot of people don't understand. I didn't invest this way when I first joined, right? I was like, oh, I want to invest in, the best tools. But in reality, some of the companies that we invest in, it's like, oh, they have, founders with the right connections or whatever reason, right? There's a lot of different criteria, and it's not necessarily the best tool is going to win. And it's a sad realization that I've learned now sitting on this side of things. But we want to invest in the companies that basically become the next Procore or the next Autodesk or the next Trimble, right? We're not looking for point solutions to invest in that are going to get acquired by these guys, because those returns are not what we're looking for. We're looking for the next $1 billion company, not the next $100 million company. So for us, that's where it's like, okay, but there are areas where, you may have a point solution initially, and that's your wedge to get into the industry and start selling your product. But there needs to be an expansion kind of opportunity on top of that for you to be a category winner. So, as an example, maybe a new ERP solution or something like that. They may start off as a payment tool or a TNM or something like that, but with the kind of, goal of becoming the ERP solution and competing with Viewpoint. And we would be like, hey, we want to invest in that company because we want to replace Viewpoint, right?
No.
That's just an example.
No one can compete with you.
I'm just picking on Aviad. But yeah, I'll let you.
It's interesting. I mean, and it's certainly a slightly different point of view. I'm talking now with the head of the Trimble Ventures as an investment group. And our focus is slightly different, because we're not necessarily looking for the company that will be sold in the highest number. We are looking for those companies who are serving well our ecosystem and can be part of the solution. Now, it can be a very expensive acquisition later on. Trimble just acquired last year for $1 billion company from Germany, Transporion, in a transportation market. But the idea of the venture, the corporate venture, is actually looking for synergy and looking to support our ecosystem, which is slightly different from a venture capital.
Yeah.
I think we think about that very similar to the way that Trimble does, right? Is, we're not making necessarily those bets for the big home runs. We're kind of playing Moneyball a little bit, let's hit a lot of singles. And also we're looking to invest in things that we think are underserved, right? So hey, somebody has a really good idea. If they could execute on it, helps our customers a lot. There's nobody doing it right now. We don't have the bandwidth. For whatever reason, we're not going to do it, right? That's a good idea for us to invest in, right? Because we want to accelerate them, but it's not because we think that they're going to be the next Viewpoint, right? It's because I had to go with the analogy, but the reality is that we're totally okay if they get acquired by private equity or they get acquired by one of our competitors, or those are all things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I asked because I think I see the companies are founding companies for things that you guys don't do yet.
Yep.
Because they hope that it'll fill one of those gaps, which I think is maybe a good thing.
I think,
Go ahead, Sunil.
from a startup perspective, right, during my pipe days, I used to always think, or at least wish for, that I hope the universe of acquirers is getting larger and larger. It is very, very incremental. It's like Hilti buying Fieldwire. There's Schneider buying tools, and then so the M&A outside of the large tech players is still very limited. So that's partly driven by the overall TAM for the industry as well. When you look at industries outside of construction, let's say the big tech, we're talking about hundreds of billions to $1 trillion TAMs in some cases, or at least hundreds of billions of dollars TAM is already established for those startups, autonomous driving, whatnot. When you take construction, I think the total TAM for us, we are talking about $15 to $20 billion. So it's very different there. Again, market cap is different from the TAM. I think that TAM needs to significantly increase to be able to attract and make sure there are new players out there that can ingest these companies. So I think being from the startup side, it's very hard, right? If there are like thousands of startups, I think recent venture reports I saw, like I think we went from like 600 startups to 6,000 startups in the last 5 years. So that's a lot. And I think the 6,000 includes prop tech as well as contact.
Yeah.
But it's still very difficult for us to sift through. It's very difficult as a customer to sift through and understand like where do you play. So if you're a startup, you need to know your niche extremely well. And I would focus more on customer, solving the problem, and build a very meaningful company with efficient dollars. That's super important, so that at least you have multiple exit paths and not just hanging your hat on, hey, a big company is going to buy me one day.
Sorry. Go ahead.
And if you are a founder, like your outcome is probably what you're looking at. And you can have a better outcome getting acquired by one of these guys than going through the IPO route. Because when you think about venture capital and continuously raising money and all that, like basically your ownership of the company gets diluted. So like there's this whole math that you can look at. But if you're optimizing based on outcome, sometimes it's actually better to exit to one of these guys than to try to, continuously raise money, try to become, the next whatever of, whatever.
Viewpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's beyond viewpoint now.
The other thing I would add that I think is really interesting, Sunil mentioned 6,000 startups, and it's been really interesting for me to watch on the sidelines of like, there's still very few spaces in the needs of construction that have more than like 3 or 4 competitors, right? There's not a lot of spaces where there's like 25 people vying for the same business. So, that's why people are going, hey, I'm going to go solve this problem that nobody else is solving, is because I don't have to compete as hard and I have a little bit of runway to get there. And it's still a big enough problem for me to make a good amount of money on. And maybe some of them are looking to build lifestyle businesses and they're not looking to actually go and build the next IPO unicorn, $1 billion company. They're like, hey, you know what? I could just make $1 million a year doing this and it'd be great, right? And that's totally okay.
Yep.
It's totally okay.
All right, we are over on time. So if you guys have additional questions, you can come find us somewhere or reach out to us. I don't know. You'll see us around. Thank you all for joining.
Thanks, everybody.
Very much.